Welcome to the Martial Arts with Jake podcast. Hear from the best martial artists and combat sports athletes from around the world. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Yes, guys, welcome to the Martial Arts with Jake podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris Miah. Chris, how you doing, mate?
All good, Jake. How you doing?
All good, thank you. For those that don't know, Chris Miah is a retired professional MMA fighter, and he's also one of the UK's top strength and conditioning coaches. How's your lockdown been, mate?
It's okay. Obviously, we've got, similar to you, we've had to adjust our coaching style and what we can do with our clients. But other than that, not too bad. I've just had COVID myself the past 3 weeks, so I'm just back on my feet now myself.
How have you found recovering from it? Like, started back training, like little bits and bobs?
I found the first sort of 2 or 3 sessions pretty damn taxing. Not so much at the time, but afterwards. But to be fair, I'm having like a gradual return to play or return to training. I've got a friend who's the Wolverhampton Wanderers doctor, and he sent me a sheet of how they're returning football players back post-COVID in terms of upping volume and intensity of sessions. So I've been kind of following something similar, where having a little bit more rest between rounds and a little bit shorter round periods and things like that nature. And I feel yesterday and today the best. I feel back to normal, so that's positive.
I feel that's the kind of thing, like we're eager, aren't we? Once you kind of get the green light, you go back to training, but that's when the injuries can happen again. So that
100%.
That ease back to training is vital, mate. Yeah.
It's like anything. You have a layoff, whether it's for an injury or illness or just a holiday, and then you go back and you can't do what you were doing when you stopped. So it's just building that up. I'm trying to practice what I preach for once in my life, and climb a little bit. Aren't
we all? Yeah, all guilty of that. Did you do anything more studying? Was it just chilling out, watching Netflix whilst you're having to isolate?
Well, I'm currently still doing the MSc. So while I'm doing that, I'm carrying on with the modules that I have to do for that. And I've actually brought another course that I'm just starting to work my way through as well. Just as it's although I'm coaching in person, my hours are kind of heavily restricted because we have limitations on obviously the space, and we're working outdoors and time of day, time of night. So because my hours are reduced, I'm trying to make the most of it and upskill in other areas of the business.
That's what I've always liked about you, mate, because you see a lot of people that get to a level they want to get to, but then they kind of stop learning. But from what I've known about you, been knowing you for a few years now, is that you're constantly looking to improve yourself.
Yeah, I think that's what, luckily for me, with teammates I've been around and people at the different gyms I train at, there's always been that mentality shift of not to rest on your laurels. And I've kind of took that to my coaching education as well, in terms of S&C and personal training. I'm always trying to upskill. Like a fighter, you're always trying to add new tools to your fighting arsenal. It's almost the same rules apply to strength and conditioning and personal training.
Superb, mate. So take me back to the beginning then. So how did your martial arts career begin?
It's a strange one. I've never really talked about this, like I said to you briefly before we had this conversation, on a podcast or really anything in public. But realistically, as a kid, I had a pretty hard, I suppose it's stereotypical, bullied kid becomes a martial artist, but I had a pretty tough time at school, and I was one of the smallest in my year group, and I had quite a tough time, especially at secondary school, even sillily to the point of stopping playing sports because I didn't want to bump into people and things like that. So and it wasn't ever it was just a case of never fighting back, to be brutally honest. In hindsight, the guys were very weak and fragile guys themselves, but it was just at that point in time I wasn't psychologically able to deal with that. So that led me down the route of kind of trying to prove a point. So I went to start boxing, was the initial martial art I tried. I tried things as a kid like kickboxing and karate, but it never really stuck. And then I went to go to what I thought was a boxing gym. I thought, I'll start boxing. And I went to Stevie B's in Acox Green. And when I walked in there was I thought 2 Spanish fellas running the desk downstairs, which was Braulio and Victor Estima, who are notoriously two of the best grapplers on the planet. so obviously they said what they did, and they did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then obviously I went upstairs in the gym, and there was like it was almost like Vale Tudo back then,
Right.
which was and a guy called Luke Cole, who also trained at Braulio's, used to run that, and Stevie B used to run like a self-defense stroke class kind of there. So it kind of I ended up kind of doing a combination of those. Obviously Braulio's place was very expensive, so I kind of done the introduction program at Braulio's because it was what I could afford at the time, and then as kind of a needs must, I ended up doing MMA because
How
not
old was you, sorry, mate, when you first started?
16.
16.
So just left year 11. So I was just I was actually doing an apprenticeship at the time at BT Openreach. And so I just left secondary school at the time when I started. I'd never done a martial art properly before. I've played a lot of football, played a lot of sports as a kid, but never any martial arts really. And it was kind of luck that, happened to be at one of the best or one of the first sort of mixed martial arts stroke Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms in the country, and as a byproduct of what the Stevie B's were doing for the community at the time, MMA was just a more affordable choice. So what I ended up doing was, at that point in time, mixed martial arts with Luke Cole and Stevie B. And then that kind of just grew. And eventually they brought in a guy called Chris Rice, who was my first MMA coach. And then at the same time, what I used to do was, like, when I could afford it, I'd put some money aside and pay for single classes at Braulio's, because I loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So what I used to do is do the MMA sessions and then also do the odd no-gi Jiu-Jitsu session at Braulio's at the same time. And then that kind of what started to happen was, like, obviously I got a bit of I started to be fighting, grown men, open weight, and doing well. It was like it was a weird thing because obviously I never fought back a lot before, and when I did, and when I was in the gym, and I was, the area was quite notorious for having a lot of the hard cases that did MMA at that gym. Heads on the area and things like that. And I used to do well, and then it got pushed towards. We had a competition team, and then it kind of spiraled from there. That I had a few interclubs and amateur fights, and I think I won my first 11 fights. I drew one against a friend now, actually, Tom Creasy, and it just happened I was very good at it, and it then it all spiraled from there into a professional career. Coaches changed along the way. Kevin Webb come in at Stevie B's, who to this day is probably the best jiu-jitsu coach I've ever trained with, and I've actually gone back this year when we've been allowed to go and train with him again, because I really thought that much of his coaching. And then it was just a case of, through my late teens, early 20s, that it went from a hobby to a career to a potentially, like, at one point in time I wanted to be UFC world champion, and it wasn't that far off the table in terms of, it was a dream, but it was a achievable dream. I felt at one point in time, for whatever reason or another, obviously things happen in life, and injuries and things don't work out, decisions and bits and bobs. But so it kind of spiraled from that. And what I found with the martial arts along the way, it was a weird one. Like, I started them to kind of prove a point, and I kind of went down some other routes as well to prove a point. Again, I've not really talked about this, but obviously with the football, with like you start to get involved certainly in sort of the Villa and sort of football violence to a degree. But then again, like and that was to prove a point, from when I was a kid. But then it reached a point where the martial arts were keeping me out of trouble. So many of my friends have, and they're my friends to this day, but they've been to jail or been in a lot of situations. And I do think the martial arts, the biggest thing is, if you're in the gym, you're not out causing trouble, and you're not in them situations. So that kind of brought me through to my mid-20s, pursuing that. And then what I decided was I wanted to do sort of this kind of thing for the rest of my life. So I went back to uni and done an undergrad in sports therapy. And it kind of kept my parents happy a little bit while I was pursuing the role of being a professional fighter. So I got my undergrad in sports therapy while I was fighting. And then I kind of then had a few years after that where I was fighting on Bama. I went away to Team Alpha Male. I went to American Top Team. I fought in Russia, competed in Portugal, and went to train with one of my childhood idols, which was Brad Pickett at the time. And he kind of took me on as a kind of a mentor to myself towards that point of my career. Obviously, things happened and I had some injuries along the way. And as I was maturing, I looked at how at the end of the day, professional fighting is showbiz. And obviously, it's not quite, the martial arts and self-defense that we always think it is. And it kind of led me towards, obviously, I got to be around some very bright minds and sort of fighters coming to the end of their career, kind of like Brad, like Matthew Macklin, Rosie Sexton, who've all had really successful careers post fighting. Yeah. And so that kind of made me niche even more towards strength and conditioning, and pursuing an education down that route off therapy, and having kind of an exit strategy for fighting. Yeah. So I've done like the major qualifications in strength conditioning, got my CSCS, and I'm currently doing a master's. I'm in my second year of my master's degree. And alongside the whole time I was fighting, I was kind of coaching alongside it, whether it be martial arts and PT stroke, rehab stroke, S&C. Yeah. So I kind of gained experience along the way of doing academia. And now I've kind of reached the point of it's slowly coming together of kind of understanding what you don't know, understanding what I need to do to improve as a coach, and hopefully starting to offer something for people now on a level of sports science, strength conditioning, and coaching in the local area and online as well. I know that's a very short, abbreviated version of what's happened, but I mean, that's kind of what's brought me to where I'm at right now.
Super, mate. We'll delve into that in more detail now. So I want to take you back to the start again, back to school. And I know you said you played football and there's that whole team environment and everything. But what about it, about the martial arts? Was it that kind of grafted you at first?
I was very emotionally driven when I started. Very emotionally driven over that. I wanted things to never happen to me again, and that kind of drive. But once I started, it's not the case at every gym, but the gym was like a family and friends, and it was like a football team. You had older lads. I was one of the youngest at that point in time at the gym. And I had older lads in the 20s, 30s who were talking to me as an equal and looking after me, and I had the banter and the crack and that. And a lot of those guys who I started training with are still some of my best friends to this day, even if we don't train together. Yeah. So like, I think the people I got to meet was what initially drew me in, and obviously the enjoyment factor of it more so than anything else at that point in time.
Because even though, like I said before, it's an individual sport, martial arts, if you're doing it as a competitive thing, but it's that the team bonding is really what kind of, you feel like you are representing a team, and like you're constantly trying to push your teammates to get better, and they kind of do. Yeah, they do feel like brothers at the end of the day, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's probably if enjoyment factor, all things aside, potentially like at the high-end professional level, it's a little bit more business, and it's a little bit more selfish. But certainly, the biggest thing that brought the initial enjoyment to it was that team kind of feeling and just that friendship thing, really.
Yeah. So when you started your MMA training, was it a complete mix? Was it pure MMA? Did you people start to get MMA that's kind of like they do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They get like to a good level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they think, oh, I'll take up MMA. But that wasn't the case for you, was it? It was kind of straight into MMA training.
Yeah, it was MMA. It was MMA training straight away. So like the two initial coaches that I had at the time was Steve Brindle and Luke Cole. Luke Cole used to teach more grappling, but it was always like jiu-jitsu with wrestling and strikes. And even the striking was always like, well, strikes, but you can get kicked and you can clinch and you can dirty box and you can. So it was always built towards MMA.
Yeah.
I also done the kind of like foundation course at Braulio's at the time, which was pure jiu-jitsu. And that's the thing I certainly excelled in as a young age in MMA, because I was the smallest guy in the gym and the youngest kid in the gym. So having obviously been able to use jiu-jitsu become quite natural, because I was always in a bad position.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've come from a weird thing of starting MMA from the start, and then it's quite funny because you kind of go back and forth on what's the best way to train martial arts. And I've had a period where I thought, no, you need to do, you know, the pure arts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, boxing, and now I've almost come back to the point of no, and the MMA has reached that point with the coaching quality that's available, where MMA is MMA. Jiu-Jitsu is, they're almost there's a lot of crossover, but they're almost individual sports now.
Is that the way you see MMA going now? Is more of like its own style? So like amateurs coming through the rankings now, or wanting to start off now, they'll go just straight into pure MMA to start with, instead of going down the route that you, like many others have gone down. They start off doing Muay Thai first, then get into it.
I think so. I think even if you look at how most of us in Birmingham have trained for most of our careers, I've gone to a good boxing coach, like at Hull Green with like Steve McCallum or Tom Cheney. I've done jiu-jitsu with Kevin Webb, or with Chew at Renegade. I've done, like, you did Thai boxing with Damien Trainer, those kinds of things, where it's the individual masters of the art. We do have them, but we don't, even to this day now, we don't have that many coaches who coach MMA well in Birmingham yet. I think when my generation retire and we have the likes of like Leon Edwards and Tom Breeze, and hopefully, you know, I'm not saying I'm in their quite Absolutely. in their league, but you know, our generation of fighters certainly will probably be the first generation of MMA coaches to Birmingham, and I think that's where we will be able to shortcut guys what works, what doesn't, as MMA has its own unique style. And I think you are starting to see a lot, you know, in other countries and in some parts of the UK where MMA is the predominant style, and there's certain things that work and don't work from all the martial arts, and just kind of having that base layer of what works to go off, I think will be the future. And that's kind of what I'm looking to do myself in Solihull at Combat Sports Centre when we come out of this, whether it's this lockdown or the next lockdown, but when we finally come out of it, that's what I'm looking to develop is an amateur scheme for mixed martial arts, to start with doing mixed martial arts.
Yeah. So knowing what you know now as a professional, because like you said, when you're amateurs, you go all in, don't you? You want to learn everything now. You train, and sometimes, in some cases, you overtrain as well. And that's when the injuries kind of come as well. So know what you know now as a professional MMA fighter, and as well as one of the top S&C coaches in the UK, in my opinion. How would you then kind of structure your week now if you get to start again as an amateur?
I think as an amateur who's looking to compete as an amateur, so there's obviously different. If they're looking to compete, the amateur level is high in that. So, you know, people are training, even as an amateur, you need to be training about 5-6 days a week. Now, the big thing is at the correct intensity to improve and develop without burning yourself out, like you say. I think the biggest thing that I think will influence that is that thing of having, like, not one coach, but a team of coaches that all talk to each other. So, like, you know, this is the ideal blueprint is well, we have you have a head MMA coach or a head coach of whatever their background is, but they know, well, what are you doing with your boxing coach, and how did that influence you, and what are you doing here and what are you doing there, so that your overall training week is tailored for. Whereas what a lot kind of do is, like, they go to the wrestling coach and they get beasted at wrestling practice, then they go to Tuesday night jiu-jitsu, and like the guys are hobbyists to trying to kill them, and then they go to Wednesday and it's sparring, and then they go to boxing, and there's no communication between coaches, between, you know, the jiu-jitsu coach and the MMA coach, or the strength conditioning coach and the, you know, it's not. There's no unison, and I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. That if I could go back in time and start again, I would have even if I wasn't all under one roof. Obviously, that's the goal that we're striving for eventually. But I would at least be making group chats where all my coaches could talk, communicate. I mean, and the other thing, a big thing for me personally, is you need to train hard and do enough. But nearly all of my injuries that I've sustained over time have been doing things that I didn't need to do.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm here early, so I'll just do some kickboxing drills. Or I've wrestled and I've fought. And I fought the weekend, but I'm going to go straight back to wrestling. And then after that, I'm going to do some conditioning because I'm super motivated. No one was there to pull me back.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I think the bottom line, what I mean is having a head coach, someone who you can be accountable to. And they don't need to be, you know, they don't necessarily even need to be, obviously they'll be a good coach, but they don't need to have all the answers to everything. They just need to know how to manage your available time, your available energy, and then outsource. You know, I have an idea when I'm coaching next year, well, this year, you know, I can't throw half of the kicks that some of the guys can do, especially at combat sports and that. But there's coaches that can teach the diverse kicks. Now, I'm not the guy for that, but I can oversee an overall training program.
Yes.
An overall development scheme. But if I can't teach something, I can outsource, but I can still quantify what the guys are going to be doing. Does that make sense?
It's having that structure and training smarter, isn't it? It's that structured training so they kind of know what they're doing on that set day, at the set times, what they're doing. So it's kind of like they got that pathway, haven't they, instead of kind of free roaming.
Yeah. And don't be wrong, like you can have a schedule and they're forever adjusting to all kinds of adversity we come up in life and just changes the situation.
Absolutely.
But having a general blueprint of like, this is what I do when, and I don't need to do any extra. This is enough. And I think some of that comes down to, you know, being confident with your coaching staff and just knowing when enough, having confidence in your own ability as well. Because that thing of always doing more is kind of so you feel mentally prepared to compete.
I want to go on this route as well. So recently, Max Holloway fought, and it was a phenomenal display against Calvin Cater. But he said post-fight that he didn't do any sparring in the build-up to it. So how do you think? Can you see MMA going down that route as well? As a whole community.
Well, like it's a weird one, that, because for every person who has this isn't just in with sparring, this is with everything.
Yeah.
For one person who has great success with a certain thing, there's another person who has an equal you know, not success, failure because of that certain thing. It's just you don't often hear about the failures because they don't make the news.
Yeah.
You know, they don't make the front page headlines. And I feel like that's one of the things with sparring. And then there's a reason why I think Max and spar as well, but it's more the fact of like, it could be anything. It's like you'll see things like so-and-so doesn't lift weights anymore.
Yeah.
But he spent 10 years lifting weights.
Yeah.
So him not lifting weights for 6 months, probably, you know, it's probably going to make him feel better, less beat up, but he's done it for 10 years and he's had all the adaptations and the changes that go along with that. To that, and then he takes it away and maybe he's doing, I don't know, body weight only work or whatever it may be, gymnastics, sprinting, whatever it may be. But he's already done all of that and built up all the groundwork doing that.
The software and hardware is already in place, isn't it?
And he puts then you get a news article, oh, this guy doesn't do, you know, such and such NFL player doesn't lift weights, or, you know, so and so doesn't eat this anymore, but they're forgetting the building blocks they've built prior to that. And I think sparring is one of those things. Like I've seen equal success not sparring and sparring. You know, like I say, I've seen failure from not sparring and I've seen success from not sparring. Max Holloway, you've got to remember, is that, you know, coming the UFC at I think 20 years of age.
Yeah.
So he's had a 10-year career at the top promotion in the world where he sparred the whole time. So for him to go, I'm not sparring for a couple of camps, you know, it's probably done him the world of good.
Yeah.
and I can see the merit in it. But should everyone stop sparring on Monday? Absolutely not. You know, and I think it depends on the individual. It depends on how they handle it. You know, it's neither here. I speak to a friend of mine, Matthew Macklin, about this quite a lot, and he give a really good example. And it's where there's no news articles like headlines, right? But he said it like this. He said, look, if Frankie Gavin's sparring every week.
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Fucking hell, my phone's talking to me. Sorry, Jake.
No, that's right, man. Don't worry about it.
Here he started talking to me. Yeah, he was basically saying, you know, if Frankie Gavin was sparring, he could spar 3 days a week. He doesn't take a ton of damage. He's very slick. He's not taking brain trauma. Spar 3 days a week. If it was Ricky Hatton sparring, he has wars.
Yeah.
They used to, you know, once or twice a week in camp would be about the limit, because they're not two in the same thing. You know, one's taking a lot more damage than the other within their sparring rounds. And, you know, I said the same with strength and conditioning. I said the same with diet. So, you know, he's on an individual basis, and we've got to be very careful when we look at anomalies to the rule to go that, you know, the reason we're all talking about it, because we are, all of our martial arts is talking about Max Holloway, great performance, and he stopped sparring. But there's a reason we're talking about it, because it isn't the norm. Now, it's a double-edged sword. That obviously the sports scientist in me does know, you know, there's a guy, Gary Turner, who's very doing a lot of research in terms of, and puts out a lot of content about concussion management and concussions. And, you know, there's no doubt about it. There's a high risk of long-term brain damage from the martial arts, especially from the combat sports of like boxing and mixed martial arts, if you spar hard. So absolutely there is, and people will say, well, we shouldn't spar, we should do these other drills and perception drills and training and to try and get the skill development without damaging the hardware. But I've still fallen on the fence. I think sparring is very much needed for a professional fighter. But I think the point I'm trying to get is just that we tend to get a lot of sensationalist news stories come out, and the reason they're so sensationalist is because they're so rare.
Yeah. I mean, I look at the Thais, how they spar, and it is like play. So they're still getting that, they're still sparring, but it's doing first gear, if that kind of makes sense. So they're still getting the movement in. They're still, the fight IQ, the ring kind of craft is there, but they're not taking as much damage.
Yeah.
For me personally, I think that is a smart way to go. But again, I know that kind of you have got to get into that fight shape as well, and the mentality switch when you do step into the ring, octagon, whatever. So yeah, it's one of them.
It's tough because I don't think there is a right answer, because exactly that. Like, anecdotally, now this is just my experience, but like I've sparred guys where I'm sparring them and I can hit them, and I get a very different reaction to when I'm play sparring them. Because they don't have that fear, they don't have that, you know. If you're myself, I'm a pressure fighter when I fight. I'm a pressure fighter in the gym. I'm a pressure fighter when I compete. So if I'm pulling my punch, one of my blessings as a you know, my striking's now amazing, but I've always been a very heavy-handed person. If I'm sparring someone who's a great technical striker in the gym, and I can't punch them hard. And now, obviously, yes, the skill development does it, but they're not getting a real feel, you know. And I've seen it where I've actually then gone, when we have sparred more intense, people have just gone, whoa, I don't want none of this. And you see the face change, and you see their technique go to pop because that not put in that situation. It's kind of like, you know, I roll with a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, but when we do jiu-jitsu with strikes, even if it's just tapping them,
it changes the game.
They're just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
You know, they're exhausted, they're making mistakes. So it's a real delicate balance between obviously preserving ourselves, improving ourselves, and not damaging ourselves.
Yeah. So I want to move on a little bit from here, Chris. So you started training MMA age 16, and you've had quite a lot of life experiences, really, until, I mean, you're in your late 20s now, are you, Chris?
Late 29, so yeah.
So 13 years plus doing it, really.
Yeah.
That's right there, yeah. So you've had a lot of experience, mate. Like, did you train in Alpha Male as well? Was it Team Alpha Male you went out to America, and you've also fought in Russia as well? Like, for a lad
Yeah.
from Birmingham to have that experiences as well, with regards to traveling and seeing the world through something you love to do.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, that some of the opportunities that the martial arts have opened up have been, like when I was a young kid, the things I looked to, the people I looked up to, Uriah Fabers at Team Alpha Male, Brad Pickett and Mike Brown at American Top Team, and in London, obviously Brad's in London, like Gunnar Nelson in Iceland. You've met these people. They were the people you like looked up to, you looked up to, and to be, to feel like an equal to them and get to train with them and have them help you and coach you and spar with them is like it is beyond my wildest imaginations when I was 16. Beyond my absolute wildest imaginations. The problem we have, I was speaking with a friend this week, and it is we always move our goalposts.
Yeah.
If you'd have said to me at 16, you'd have achieved what you've achieved now, and your life would be how it is now, I'd have snapped their arms off for it. God's given me everything I could ever want.
Yeah.
But obviously, we always move the goalposts. So I look back at myself now, and I wish I could have. If situations would have been different, maybe I'd have achieved more. Maybe I'd have got the break, and I still think about competing myself. Still not, that flame isn't necessarily out yet, but. I try to use my brain with the decisions I make and whatnot. But the opportunities that, as I say, for kids, I think the opportunities that doing martial arts can bring you, from friendships to traveling experiences to even just, especially the day and age now, just keeping you out of trouble.
Yeah,
as a massive one. I think it's actually pretty crazy what it's brought to my life.
Yeah, like you said, you could have gone down that certain route with the football. But the martial arts gave that discipline and focus to kind of stay on the track you want to do to achieve your goals, which now, like you said, you're looking back and you have.
Yeah, and I think it's one of them weird ones where, and I think your coach matters massively.
Yeah.
Like I think you and your dad do such a great job being role models with what you do. But I don't think, doing a martial art, and I don't think they can change. They can't turn a good person into a bad person into a good person. But that's where, like, the very least thing it's going to do is going to keep you occupied.
Yeah.
Which might keep you out of. We're all capable of good and bad, and this is just me anecdotally. I don't think martial arts change people's moral compass. Personally, I know way too many fighters who are absolute arseholes. And I know a lot who are saints. And I think the biggest thing it does is it keeps you out of potential situations, at the very least.
Yeah.
Now, I think down to who your coach is, who your parents are, what environment you're in, you can turn a bad kid good and a good kid bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing it brings is just that you're not in the positions to be in trouble.
I was listening to to Darren Till talk about the relationship with his head coach, Colin, and that kind of, since he started training, he'd just keep him on that straight and narrow the whole time.
Yeah.
Constant, like he said, that head coach, even when he was in Brazil, he was getting them constant message off his coach, checking in, daily check-ins, to kind of make sure he was on that right path. Which I think, having a positive role model in your life, I think you do need it. You do need it.
No, definitely. I see even with a lot of the amateurs now that are coming up for MMA, and even myself, like I needed. Some people really excel without a head coach or without that mentor, but for me, I felt I always needed a mentor. Like for me, when I used to go to London a lot with Brad Pickett, I felt like he was a mentor, and he was a really good. He's one of the, he's a good man, and seeing that, and seeing like one of your heroes be like that, made you want to be like that. So I do, like I say, I think they are important. I see the amateur fighters even now, and they're craving that kind of role model that they can follow, example of who leads. And I think we are lucky in Birmingham now that we are starting to get guys like the stuff Leon's doing for knife crime, the example Tom Breeze sets in Birmingham. I'd like to think, the example I help set, the example Jake Hadley sets. We are hopefully we can be an example for other people
The talent pool is
coming up.
phenomenal. The talent pool is absolutely phenomenal coming out of Birmingham at the minute as well. Like, it is superb. And like you said, I'm thinking now, really, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the UK, it's not old. It's still relatively new. If you think about it in perspective to like other arts, like Muay Thai, karate, they've been in the UK for years. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's quite a new martial art to come to the UK, if that makes any sense. So
No, it is. I mean, we're still probably within 20 years probably.
yeah,
It's probably been 20, 25 years, which if you compare it, like you said, to karate, points, kickboxing, boxing, we've had a rich culture of that.
yeah, and we're kind of getting that like second generation of black belts coming through now.
Yeah.
Because it was
Yeah.
Mauricio and Breyer that come over first, started teaching, and then they get their black belts, and then it's 10 years down the line again, they're producing black belts, their students.
Yeah, and we're starting to slowly get a bit more of a grappling culture
Yeah.
into the UK. Obviously, we had a grappling culture many years ago with catch wrestling, and we kind of lost our culture of grappling for a long time.
Yeah.
But like now you say, like I think especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think we are slowly producing, you know, some guys who can compete at world level. Even in the UK right now, we have guys like Ross Nichols, Bradley Hill, Ashley Williams in Wales, who are they're competing with the best guys in the world, and we're slowly getting there. We don't quite have that in wrestling, unfortunately, just yet. But certainly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we have guys now. Fionn Davis in Wales as well.
Yeah.
We have guys competing right at that upper echelon of the sport, which is great to see. And of course, we're doing the same in mixed martial arts as well nationwide.
Yeah, it's great to see. So, Chris, you've been lucky enough to fight as a lad from Birmingham in the two biggest indoor arenas in Birmingham as well, with the NEC and the NIA. So how does that kind of make you feel as like a football fan as well as yourself? So like you're in the stands and you're chanting players' names to like, I was at your last fight against Brian Boland, and mate, what a performance that was. But how does it feel for you being backstage before the fight, hearing people chanting your name, whilst you're in the cage hearing people chanting your name, and then post fight as well? Like, how does it make you feel inside hearing like you're in the NEC, which is the biggest indoor arena we got in Birmingham, and hearing people just chanting your name from where you started to where you finished in your last fight?
It's a bit surreal. When you look back on it, it's surreal. Like I went to Obama when I was 17 at the NEC, and that was the first MMA show I'd been, like a proper MMA show I'd been to. And it's funny that I ended up, you know, that you looked up to them like gods back then. Yeah. And then obviously like ending my career at the NEC was like, you know, it was quite like almost coming full circle.
Yeah.
As far as like listening to people, you don't really, me personally, I never picked up on it at the time. With me, I always had very tough weight cuts, and then I was always the occasion of the opponent in front of me and what that win or loss might mean to me. So you really I always really zoned out. I didn't hear a thing ever when I was competing. But when I tend to watch videos back, whether it's on television or on people's recordings or whatever, you do get that shivers of like, wow, that's actually people are there to support me and on this stage. Like I say, if you ask me on a one day of the week, I'd have said like everything I've done is a failure because my goalposts moved and I wanted to be in the UFC and I wanted to be a champion and these kinds of things. But then if you actually ask me what I've achieved from when I started, like you said, like I could never imagine what I've done. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Like you've gone from being, like you said, you started doing martial arts in that training because you were getting bullied.
Yeah.
And then then look at the full circle, which I'm sure there might be a little bit more afterwards though, mate. But look at the full circle you got to now. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, I'd encourage. I feel like most of the I mean, it's one of those things. Pain drives, like, is a big, massive driver, and hurt is a massive driver for success a lot of the time. But a lot of the sort of negative things that have come across in my life from like childhood, I feel like if I'd have just done martial arts as a child, not necessarily to be the bully, but just to nip it in the bud early and to have the confidence and sort of body awareness and self-awareness that brings, I feel like so many of the psychological barriers I deal with in my life all the way along the way. I mean, maybe I wouldn't have had the motivation to go and become a professional fighter, but I think by doing them as a kid, it would have nipped so much in the bud earlier in life. But like you say, everything, as cliche as it is, everything for a reason, because that motivation drove me to achieve what I've achieved.
You kind of do see that. Like, my story is different to yours. I was brought up doing it, but what you have noticed is people that do start martial arts later in life, there is a reason for it. I mean, yeah, some people might see the UFC on TV and think, my God, that's cool, I want to do that. But for people that don't want to get into fighting kind of thing, they have a reason. There might have been a certain trigger point for a reason why they have to step on the mats. And some people, the hardest part is stepping on the mats. But once they do, what a journey it is for them as well.
Yeah, and I mean, even your dad's martial arts journey,
right? Yeah,
was heavily impacted by a certain incident, and that led to a load of development that he would have never had if that incident wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So I generally think most fighters are dealing with something. I know so many through professional boxing and professional mixed martial arts, and I generally do think that there's been a reason, whatever that reason may be, to bring them to do what they do. And it is one of those things. It's like, especially in the UK, it's so common. I think in America, you tend to get a lot more athletes cross over to mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
I feel like in England, most mixed martial artists come from the martial arts. I feel like in America, most fighters come from athlete wrestling backgrounds.
NCAA wrestling, high school wrestling.
Anecdotally, like, that's what I see a lot of. If you were to look at the kind of people who've really developed through UK MMA, why they've started, a lot of them were either in trouble or got bullied, or they were doing traditional martial arts, and they wanted to then test it. Those kinds of backgrounds, more so than say in like I say, in America, it is just a continuation of college sport almost.
Do you think it should be part of the school curriculum? Looking at how the Americans do it with the wrestling.
Oh, should wrestling? Yeah, I think grappling or some kind of variation thereof, whether it's jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo, a variation of mixed martial arts, potentially without head trauma, should be in schools, I think. But if anything, it looks like at the moment we're going the other way in terms of what's in schools. But certainly doing something in that nature, I think, would be important.
So can we touch on now, mate, what you do now for a living, which is a strength and conditioning coach? So can we touch on that? So like you said, you've got a plan in place for post-career, and like the people that you've kind of took inspiration from, like Rosie Sexton. So how did that fall into place?
What bit? In how I met Rosie, or how my job now works?
So how your job now works, sorry.
So generally speaking now, like there's kind of two. I say I have like 3 job roles. So I'm an S&C coach locally, and that also falls into the remit of a personal trainer, as much as you'll hear a lot of S&C coaches online just put up stuff with their pro athletes.
Yeah.
Most of the pro athletes they work with in the private sector don't pay them. I've never been that way inclined. I've always charged, but it can be quite, I would say, just as much even as Gen Pop clients as athletes that I work with. And it's great from that perspective. But again, I feel like from my clientele, I'm helping athletes chase their dreams. But even Gen Pop, the difference of people people giving up alcohol and addictions, similar to the martial arts, but helping people obviously live a healthier lifestyle, cut through kind of common dogma or common misconceptions about fitness and health and strength conditioning, and strength training in general. So it kind of ties well, because my initial undergrad was in sports rehab. Having that rehab, strength conditioning background and my own personal experience lets me kind of, it's really, we're just trying to make people healthier people, right? Whether they're an athlete, they might go towards more the performance end. If they're Gen Pop, it might be a little bit more towards the health end. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help people get better in person. online, I've also opened up quite a lot, especially this year, given the COVID climate. It's allowed me to work with a lot more professional athletes online, because obviously if you were to look at it in Birmingham, we have, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 professional fighters, and professional fighting unfortunately doesn't pay the best. So most fighters who train get sponsored in their training. They don't pay. I don't know any pro fighter in Birmingham that pays for the rest. I actually used to pay my coach, actually, tell her, but most, because I understood the troubles of it. But most pro fighters in Birmingham don't pay their S&C coach to train. They're training for free because there's not the money in the sport yet, on the whole, But I also knew that there was a lot of fighters that wanted to work with me, and people that look at my material, and obviously they're not in the local vicinity. So what that's let me do is open up my coaching services online and let me work with people from all over the country. And at the moment, most people are in this country, but potentially the world. That is the beauty of social media and being online, that we can coach guys worldwide. And there has been a really, really big interest, which is it's quite humbling, actually, having people from all over the country want to train with you. And then also I've been coaching mixed martial arts and it's been a bit of a rocky road at the moment, given the current COVID restrictions, but on and off at Combat Sports Centre in Solihull, Banbury Martial Arts Centre in Banbury.
Okay.
Which have been coaching roles where they wanted me to run there, almost be like a senior, I don't know what the word would be, but like obviously senior coach, but also almost like not counselling, but like consultant for the guys who are competing in MMA, and sort of to direct and oversee their training.
Like a head coach from, like you said.
Yeah, in essence, like, because they've got a lot of the gyms already have great coaches, but just to sort of overlook their fight team more than anything, can obviously look to produce guys. So I kind of have 3 job roles. I have my in-person coaching, which is usually a blend of gem pop and athletes. So I have like jiu-jitsu guys, wrestlers, MMA guys, and then I have you Jack the lad in the pub that wants to learn how to lift correctly and get healthy habits. And like if you train, it's quite simple, but for someone who's not in that circle, what they see on the internet and on social media and with celebrities, it's quite a confusing place. So I'm kind of there to help make it less confusing for them, really, and help guide them as I would an athlete. Obviously the online coaching, and then the technical coaching. So it's all come to a point where I've always juggled little bits and bobs of all of them. But now, obviously, when I took retirement last year from competing myself, it's kind of opened up a chance now. Obviously, COVID's hit since then, so it has been a bit on the shelf because of COVID, but it's opening up the possibilities to be kind of deep down. I want to try and be what I wanted in Birmingham, which was someone who would be able to deal with all the different issues, the technical issues, tactical issues, S&C, and put an arm around you, So that's kind of drawn me to where I'm at. It's just a case of waiting till things pass over to be able to really get the ball rolling and start getting guys competing, and who knows where it could lead. We really don't know. It's kind of like, I suppose, with your stuff as well. You're picking up traction throughout this lockdown, but you can't wait to get back to in-person coaching.
You've had no choice but to think outside the box during this time to get yourself online as well. I mean, you've had to get creative. I think the one thing I've took away from this whole lockdown, it has been the creativity side of it, and ways to get things across to people, like you said, through your online coaching as well. Yeah,
I mean, it's quite funny, man. You've actually inspired me to get back online, because I have a real love-hate relationship with social media.
I think we all do, mate, don't we?
I kind of come off it because I was very busy. I didn't need any more clients, and it's certainly in person. And I was kind of like, I felt like it was quite toxic at times this year. But seeing how you've obviously marketed and sort of put out really good content from your side of things, and obviously it's picked up a lot of traction as well. It's kind of made me. I spoke to a friend and he said, "Look, if people are gonna listen to someone, they're gonna watch something, whether it's you or someone else. Now, at least on your moral conscience, if it's you, you're putting out good information, good content, reliable content. you know, and for a long time I've kind of hid away and shied away, and then I've done a bit, and then I've pulled away, and then I've done a bit, and then pulled away. Whereas this kind of whole thing, and to be honest, speaking to you and another friend of mine asked me to do a podcast this week as well, and it's like it's just time to, you have got to put yourself out there, haven't you? And I think you've been a good example of that, where, you know, you always worry, you get that kind of Dunning-Kruger, you get that kind of imposter syndrome. You start thinking, you know, is this good enough? Am I good enough? And it's kind of, when you do it, people are like, this is amazing, this is really good content, this is really good. But in your head, you're still thinking all the time, is that combination good enough? Did I look good enough doing that? I'm telling someone how to throw this, or I'm giving out this. Is that good enough? Is that professional enough? Is that? And sometimes, like, you do it and people are really impressed.
Yeah.
It's just a case of having the confidence to keep doing it.
It's kind of like, okay, I'll put out a piece of content and it gets, say, I don't know, on a TikTok, it gets 20,000 likes, but it gets 3 negative comments. And you kind of, as a human being, you do focus on them 3 comments, the 3 negative ones, but proportionally wise, percentage wise, 20,000 people have liked it, whereas 3 people have maybe said a comment, and you do think about it. But at the end of the day, like I said, if we can just inspire one person to start their journey in martial arts, in strength and conditioning, to get a healthy lifestyle, for me, mate, I've done my job.
Yeah. And I think you're always going to get, it was very cliche, people talk about haters and this and that. And I think, like, you know, it's very easy to criticize. And I've been guilty of it in the past of, you know, oh, that's not quite good enough, and that's not what's it. But you know what? If you're putting yourself out there, and as long as you're not putting out things that are misinformation, or as long as you genuinely believe that at that point in time, that's the best that you can possibly do, and the most accurate information you can give people, like, you do it, and it will come. And no doubt we'll look back on it in 5 years' time and go, that was shit, that was. I'm so much better now. But that's the whole journey of improving as a coach. And if you're not looking at that in years to come cringing, you know, you've probably not come that far as a coach. So, you know, it's one of them things of just like I say, you've actually forced me to start to do it again, really. And it's funny, I've put out a little bit of content again recently, and people really enjoy it. But, you know, it is that dangerous game of, like, the pros and cons of social media. But as long as you use it and don't use you,
absolutely. With that said, mate, where can people find you?
So at the moment, my main sort of coaching page, and where you'll find all my business details, is at Chris Miah Coaching on Instagram and Facebook. I also have a direct website, just chrismiah.com, that has obviously all the services I offer and where I can be found. And they're the things that I'll be putting out most of my content on and information on at the moment.
I'll put all the links to your profiles in the comment section as well, mate, in the details of this, so people can come and find you as well. Because I mean, I've trained you myself, mate. I can't recommend you enough as well.
I really appreciate that.
Anyone in the industry, like, he's the man. With that being said, mate, I want to leave you on this one. If you had to start again, what advice would you give to a 16-year-old Chris Miah?
If I was starting again, I would find the best that I could physically afford in whatever I was gonna go to do, whether that would be, you know, boxing, Thai boxing, whether I'm doing self-defense, whether I'm doing jiu-jitsu, S&C, weightlifting, whatever it is, bodybuilding, whatever I decided to pursue, I would have shortcutted so much time and heartache by just going, I'll pay. Don't take the free option, or that, my mate just does a bit of this, so I'll go and get a coach to coach you. You know, even now when I do anything, I have my own S&C coach who programs for me. I have a boxing coach. I pay for jiu-jitsu coaching. I pay for a wrestling coach. If I was going to learn a musical instrument, I would go and get the tutor. And I think, you know, obviously finances are an issue, but what I would do is I'd always encourage guys to go and do their research on wherever they're going to go and train, on the coaches, on the system, on whatever it is. And then obviously if you've got finances, it's a little bit different, but I would ensure that you're getting the very best coaching from the start. You know, we have the internet now. It's so easy to look up not only where the gym is, who the coaches are, what the coaches have achieved, who the coaches have produced, and then also to try a couple of gyms and see what suits you. What do you like coaching style? Do you like the coach? Because a great coach for one person can be a poor coach for another. But I would definitely say, like, do your homework on whatever it is you're trying to pursue, and then once you know it, then like get someone who's gone there and done it and been there and done it to shortcut it for you, because they can cut out. I could cut out. I feel like I could produce someone as good as me in half the time now.
Yeah. You look at Ben Francis, the Gymshark founder. He invested in people that could do the job better than he could to grow. And it's that self-investment, isn't it, really, where you kind of reap the rewards from it.
Absolutely. It's something I'm doing right now. I'm looking at doing with my marketing side of things, because obviously I've got an academic education and I've got an personal experience, but learning how to use social media, these are skills that, like, really I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just putting that stuff.
Yeah.
But someone does, and they can shortcut that for me. And obviously, I do believe we should be using trial and error and using our own personal learning experiences. So I'm not saying like just do as you're told and never experiment, but I do certainly think if you're a young kid starting martial arts, finding a good instructor or a good coach who can shortcut your journey is the number one way to have progress, really.
Superb. Chris, mate, on that note, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate your time. And for those that are wondering about Chris's services, the links will be in the description below as well. So thank you, Chris. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button so you don't miss out on my latest episode. And for more martial arts content, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Just follow @martialartswithjake.